And once again, my whole thing was I seen something, right? When I seen Black Compass did the interview, right? He knew who told Swave that. But in that interview, it still felt like he was painting a picture that Beasley did this. Beasley did this to me.
Y'all know why we here, man. Y'all see the title, man. Y'all know why we here. It started with ARP on the Norbs It All podcast, putting it out into the universe that Swave Sevah contacted him, letting him know that URL did something similar to Swave Sevah that allegedly URL also did to NBS Central. He gets on Norb's podcast, puts the information out there. ARP does a second interview on Black Compass Media where ARP doubles down while he's going back and forth with Tony Bro and Black Compass Media. He doubles down on the allegations on NBS Central, but also further includes Swave Sevah and his name while he's making a point for the NBS Central situation. So Swave Sevah feels a way about it, responds on 15 Minutes of Fame, and then shortly thereafter, Nunu Nails comes out, confirms and addresses the situation. This is a very messy situation, but we'll break it down. Let's talk about it. First of all, I just want to say that this situation between ARP, Beasley, NBS Central has taken a turn for the worse, bro. Taken a turn for the worse. Just recently, ARP did an interview with Norbs. Salute to Norbito, salute to ARP. In this interview, ARP puts out into the universe that the URL recently reached out to Swave Sevah to try and prevent him from covering RBE anywhere around URL or URL event. These news were exposed on the Norbs It All interview with ARP. That was the first time that that information had been put out there. That URL in some way, shape, or form tried to prevent 15 Minutes of Fame, a representative of 15 Minutes of Fame, so 15 Minutes of Fame, from covering and or asking any questions about the competitor league in their space. This information just came out. There was nothing major, no major blogs or nothing popped up after that, because I'm not going to lie, when ARP said that, it was maybe like 45 minutes to an hour in to the interview with Norb. So a lot of people probably didn't really catch, right, or even get to the point where ARP put the information out there. The following day, I believe, or maybe 2 days later, ARP does an interview on Black Compass Media. In this interview, ARP is asked about a specific blog that he did regarding and or speaking about compromised media. Tony Bro felt as if though a blog that ARP did about compromised media applied to Tony Bro. So Tony Bro and ARP end up going back and forth regarding the situation because the blog that ARP did had to do with the allegations that were made by ARP and NBS Central, stating that Beasley had reached out to try and offer money to stop them from covering other leagues. So Tony Bro felt as if though the blog that ARP did applied to him. So they started talking about the NBS Beasley controversy, right? And they started going back and forth. Got pretty emotional, right? Got a little bit out of hand, if you ask me. You know what I mean? In that conversation and in that back and forth that was going on, ARP once again brings up the fact that Swave Sevah contacted ARP a few days prior to let ARP know that URL staff, or over there at URL, when he asked about a Murder Mook versus Big K battle, there were comments and things that were said that were offensive and that Swave didn't like. It had to do with the beef between RBE and URL. So apparently what happened, or what Swave Sevah said happened, because Swave Sevah then came out and let us know what happened, was that he was interviewing DNA. And at the end of their interview, he asked DNA about the Murder Mook versus Big K battle. Nunu Nellz waited till after that interview was done to then make comments about the situation. Now, Nunu Nails obviously made comments about, you know, having to do with the whole RBE URL beef and the fact that they shouldn't be covering RBE over there, whatever the case was. Apparently, the comments that Nunu Nails made to Swave Sevah were offensive to the point where Swave Sevah wanted to speak and or vent to somebody about it. So one of the people that Swave considers his friends is ARP. And the comments were regarding RBE and ARP. So Swave Sevah explains that after the situation happened, Swave Sevah contacted ARP to pretty much vent to ARP. To pretty much vent, let him know that he wishes that they would squash it and blah, blah, blah. Most likely, Swave Sevah let ARP know what had just happened. Because this is why Swave Sevah decided to bring up the situation while he was on Black Compass Media discussing the NBS and Beasley controversy and situation. ARP had said that a similar situation to that had just happened recently. He was referring to the Swave Sevah situation, where Swave Sevah just recently contacted him. After Swave Sevah comes out, he also lets us know that he feels like he was used as a, pretty much he was used as a weapon. He was weaponized, you know, and he trusted ARP and blah, blah, blah. He saw ARP as somebody who he could vent to, and ARP wouldn't be out here putting things out into the universe like that and throwing him under the bus and blah, blah, blah. So Swave Sevah felt the way about ARP even bringing up the situation. Shortly after this happens, right, and ARP and the Black Compass situation goes down and they go back and forth and they once again bring up Swave Sevah's name. The day after, Nunu Nellz gets on Spaces just recently. And this is why, man, when I'm at work, I be so tight that I'm at work sometimes because I can't just up and make a video when things happen sometimes. So I apologize for that to some of you guys. Some of you guys probably expect to see a video when something happens, but oftentimes I'm at work and I can't just do that. I hate that. I'm not going to lie. So Nunu Nellz then comes out shortly after that, and Nunu Nellz explains to everybody pretty much what went down. Nunu Nellz doubles down on the fact that she, in fact, did make comments when Swave Sevah brought up Murder Mook versus Big K, that she, in fact, did and has every right to do so because he is on URL territory pretty much. And they are competitor leagues after all. So Nunu Nellz confirms what it was that Swave Sevah said happened. Was ARP wrong for having brought up Swave Sevah's name in this conversation? And I'm going to keep it real. Like I've said this before, bro. If I feel that Beasley did something wrong, I'm going to speak on it and call it out. If I feel like ARP might have made a mistake or did something wrong, I'm going to speak on it and I'm going to call it out. And I'm not going to hold y'all. In this situation, I do not think that ARP should have put Swave Sevah's name out there into the universe like that. I do not think that it was right. The only reason I don't think it was right is because after ARP puts this information out into the universe and actually puts a name on it, what then happens to what Swave Sevah has going on, right? Now, how does the URL or people like the URL, mind you, 15 minutes of fame and URL are close, right? And they report for them and they do all this and that. How does the URL now view somebody like Swave Sevah? Do they view Swave Sevah as intel now? Do they view Swave Sevah as somebody whom you can't really have around because you can't or you don't know what it is that Swave Sevah is going to relay to the competition or the competitor? These are just some of the things that start to come about, right? When in ARP, while he's trying to make the point with this whole NBS and Beasley controversy, decides to just throw Swave Sevah's name in there. This surprised me. This surprised me a lot because I didn't see, or I didn't think that ARP would do something like that. I would have thought that ARP would have kept that information to himself. You know what I'm saying? Until the time was right, or if there was ever a time that something like this needed to be brought up. The thing now is that I feel as if, though, the point that ARP was trying to make by bringing up Swave Sevah is now backfiring on him. Because what I'm seeing out here right now is Swave Sevah saying he felt the way about ARP doing that. Then you have Nunu Nellz doubling down on the fact that there is absolutely nothing wrong with what she did and making a comment about whatever comment she made regarding the other league, that there's nothing wrong with that. And I see a lot of the battle rap community agreeing and understanding. Another reason why I feel like ARP went wrong with doing that and throwing Swave Sevah's name into the mix is because ARP stated that a similar situation happened with Swave Sevah and NBS Central. But the way that Swave Sevah and Nunu Nails describe the situation, how it went down, doesn't necessarily sound like it does, and it doesn't sound like a similar thing to what happened with NBS Central. Ultimately, the bigger picture is that somebody from URL didn't want any coverage on RBE at their event. That's the bigger picture. That's pretty much the similarity between the two. That's the similarity right there, is that the URL brand or somebody from URL didn't want somebody else to cover the competitor league. That's where it's similar. Where it's not similar is in the sense that Swave Sevah was offered money to prevent them from covering RBE in general. That's where it's not similar. And this is where I feel like, as smart as ARP is, to have thrown Swave Sevah's situation into the mix like that, I don't think was the best way to go, only because the situation is different. It is significantly different. Although I understand where ARP is coming from. Again, the similarity between the two situations being that URL simply doesn't want another entity to cover their competitor. That's the similarity. Where they're not the same, though, is the situation when you start to get into the details. The allegation made by NBS and ARP initially was that Beasley himself reached out to NBS Central and offered them money to prevent them from covering RBE. That was the initial situation. Swave Sevah's situation was, this is the way that he described it, and Nunu Nails confirms that this is what happened. So I'm tending to believe that this is actually what happened. Swave Sevah was doing an interview with DNA in a URL space. Like, he was in there. He was in a room full of URL people at a URL event, all URL. Swave Sevah does an interview with DNA and at the end asks about Murda Mook versus Big K. After the interview is done, comments were made about most likely the fact that Swave Sevah did that or is asking about RBE questions in a URL event. That is not the same as Beasley or one of these people reaching out to the entity and offering them money to not cover these people in general or going forward or whatever the case is. So this is where, me knowing that ARP is a smart dude, this is where I'm like, oh, this is kind of where ARP might have, like, oh. Another question that was brought up was, why was this question about Murda Mook versus Big K even asked at a URL event? Implying that 15 Minutes of Fame was simply trying to stir up controversy and or continue speaking on these league beefs and continue to make it a... Some people think that this Murda Mook versus Big K question that was asked by Swave Sevah was in ill intent, was with ill intent, or to try and stir something up or whatever the case is. But people need to understand that 15 Minutes of Fame is a battle rap media channel that covers everything. They try to cover whatever they can, especially big names. Whenever there's a big name in a title or something going on with a big name, that's what media places are going to be mostly covering, bro, because that's where a lot of traction and views and momentum and stuff comes from. So when you're around battle rappers, why would you not ask about a battle that involves pretty much one of the most important figures in battle rap, Murda Mook? This question was being asked in that environment not to stir up any controversy or any problems or any issues or nothing like that. This question was asked because it's a big battle. It's Murda Mook. This is why this question is being asked in this area or in this environment. It has nothing to do with 15 minutes of fame, Uncle Raw or Swave Sevah trying to stir up anything between URL and RBE. That is not at all the case. Nunu Nellz, though. Nunu Nellz. This is one of the reasons, though, that we're unable to coexist. People like Nunu Nellz make it difficult for battle leagues to coexist. How does Swave Sevah asking a question about Murda Mook versus Big K affect you, Nunu Nellz? How does Swave Sevah asking a question about Murda Mook versus Big K personally affect you, Nunu Nellz? We get it that you're on the URL side. Oh, URL everything, URL to the death of me, But let's be mature, right? And let's be honest for a second. How exactly does Swave Sevah asking a question about Murda Mook versus Big K affect you, Nunu Nellz, to the point where you feel like you need to make commentary or say this or say that to a well-respected entity such as 15 Minutes of Fame? How does it personally affect you for this question to be asked? It doesn't. It doesn't affect you at all. And this is what I mean by, bro, people like Nunu Nellz make it difficult for this leagues and things to coexist because this doesn't even affect you, right? The fact that Swave Sevah is asking DNA about Murda Mook versus Big K has nothing to do with you, Nunu Nellz. Yet you want to insert yourself, right? And you want to start to say things and question why RBE or a RBE battle is being mentioned here and blase blah, and it shouldn't be, and blase blah, making it something that it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that. We should be able to coexist. There's so many different ways to go about addressing what I think or how I feel about the situation, bro. I feel like ARP messed up by throwing Swave Sevah under the bus. Yes, that's what I said, by throwing Swave Sevah under the bus. I guess some people don't feel like that was the case, but that was actually literally the case. When I was watching the Norbs interview on Norbs' channel, ARP, before he mentioned Swave's name, when he brought up the situation, he was thinking very hard about whether or not he should even name drop Swave. To the point where he was like, oh, fuck it, I'll say it, Swave. That's what he said. He said, all right, fuck it, I'll say it, Swave. Because ARP himself knew that if he did that, he'd be opening up a can of worms. He'd be open. That's why he had that thought and that emotion before he name dropped Swave on Norbito's podcast, bro. Because he knew that this would open a can of worms. And what did it do? It opened up a can of worms. Then he doubled down and said Swave Sevah's name again on Black Compass Media. That blew it up even more out of proportion. So Swave Sevah now felt like he had to respond because he's getting backlash. Is Swave Sevah wrong for confiding in ARP? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, if ARP hadn't have done this, right, and thrown Swave Sevah's name into the mix like that, Swave Sevah could have probably been somebody who could have given him more information at some point down the line. Not saying that that would be cool or whatever the case is, but bro, this is becoming legal situations. These are coming to court situations. This is business now, bro. So to have intel on business would be dope. But now ARP burns that bridge now because Swave Sevah can't trust now to tell you things, bro, because you've already because of what just happened. So Swave Sevah is not wrong for confiding in ARP. As a matter of fact, I feel like ARP should have just been happy with the fact that Swave is calling him and letting him know kind of sort of what's going on as far as the energy. and what's going on when a RBE battle is even mentioned around the way. Like, he should have been thankful for that, but he took it a step further and put his name in the mix. So now Swave Sevah feels away. He felt like he was being used as a weapon for ARP to use, however he was using him. You know what I'm saying? Or the situation of the story. Swave Sevah makes the whole situation sound as if though it wasn't even what it was that ARP tried to make it sound like. If y'all notice, the way Swave Sevah breaks down what happened sounds completely different than the way that ARP said that the situation was similar to NBS Central. Then Nunu Nellz comes out and doubles down. Is Nunu Nellz wrong for feeling a way about Swave asking a question, a RBE question? This whole thing is just messy, bro. But one thing that people should not get away from, right, is that even though this situation turned out the way that it turned out, and all the details and everything came out, right, with the Swave Sevah URL ARP situation, this does not mean that the previous situation between NBS and Beasley did not happen. And I feel like right now what's going on is the noise that's happening with the Swave Sevah, Nunu, and ARP situation is overtaking that of the initial situation that we were even looking for a response. We were looking to get to the bottom of the first situation, but now this situation pops up and it's overtaking completely the first initial situation. So now this is a good opportunity for URL employees or URL, affiliated peoples to now speak more and push more this, because it turned out to not be what ARP said, so that we can forget about the actual situation between NBS, Beasley, and ARP that initiated this entire conversation in the first place. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Jesus. Let me know what y'all think, man. You already know what it is. It's your boy Joe coming at you live and direct from the battle.